I thought I had experienced every possible flavor of entitled behavior during my years practicing entertainment law in Los Angeles. I had negotiated with egotistical studio executives, dealt with temperamental directors, and mediated disputes between millionaire actors arguing over trailer sizes. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for Karen Whitmore and her complete disregard for basic human decency at the Riverside Premium Cinema. It started on what should have been a perfect Friday evening. I had just closed a major contract for one of my clients, a deal that would see a beloved independent film franchise finally get the theatrical distribution it deserved. To celebrate, I decided to catch the 7 p.m. showing of a film I had been anticipating for months, a quiet, atmospheric thriller that relied heavily on tension and subtle audio cues. I arrived early, selected the perfect seat in the center of the theater, and settled in with my overpriced popcorn, ready to decompress after a long week. The previews had just started when she walked in. Karen was probably in her mid-50s, with that distinctive haircut that had somehow become the universal symbol of impending confrontation, severely angled and bleached to within an inch of its life. She wore a velour tracksuit in hot pink, carried a designer handbag that was obviously fake, and had her phone clutched in her hand like it was a sacred artifact. She chose a seat 3 rows ahead of me, right in the center, despite the theater being only about half full. Before I get too deep into this story, do me a favor and smash that like button if you have ever dealt with someone who thinks the rules do not apply to them. And subscribe to Karen Eat World because trust me, you are going to want to hear how this ends. Hit that notification bell too, because we post stories of entitled people getting exactly what they deserve every single week. The moment the opening credits began to roll, Karen's phone rang. Not on vibrate. Not silenced. The full, obnoxious ringtone blared through the theater, some country song at maximum volume. Several people, including myself, turned to look, expecting her to quickly silence it and apologize. Instead, Karen answered it. "Oh hey, Debbie. I am just at the movies." Yeah, it just started." "No, it is fine, I can talk." I could not believe what I was hearing. Someone a few rows back called out, "Excuse me, could you please take that outside?" Karen waved her hand dismissively without even turning around. "I will just be a minute," she announced loudly, as if that made it acceptable. She proceeded to have a full conversation about her daughter's upcoming birthday party, discussing venues, catering options, and guest lists in exhaustive detail. The call lasted at least 10 minutes, during which we missed crucial exposition and several key scenes. When she finally hung up, I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. About 15 minutes later, her phone rang again. Same obnoxious ringtone. Same lack of hesitation in answering. "Hey, girl." "No, I told you I could talk. I am just sitting here watching some movie. It is not that interesting anyway." This time she launched into a detailed complaint about her homeowners association and some dispute she was having with a neighbor over a fence. The irony of her complaining about someone else being inconsiderate was not lost on me. By now, at least a dozen people had shushed her, and several had gotten up to find theater staff. An usher, a young man who could not have been more than 19, approached her nervously. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to either silence your phone or take your calls outside. Other guests are complaining." Karen looked at him like he had just suggested she set herself on fire. "Excuse me? I paid good money for this ticket. I can do what I want. If people do not like it, they can move." The usher, clearly not paid enough to deal with this level of entitlement, retreated. Karen went back to her call, now speaking even louder, as if to prove a point. She stayed on that call for another 20 minutes. When she finally ended it, she immediately started scrolling through her phone, the screen brightness turned up to maximum, creating a glowing beacon of light pollution in the darkened theater. She began texting someone, and I could hear the clicking of her acrylic nails against the screen from 3 rows back. Then came call number 3. At this point, I had missed so much of the movie that I had lost the thread of the plot entirely. The protagonist was supposed to be searching for clues in near silence, but all I could hear was Karen discussing her upcoming vacation plans to Cancun. I know, right? And the resort better be as nice as it looks online because I will absolutely be leaving reviews if it is not. I do not care if it ruins their business. They should have better service. That was when something inside me snapped. Not in an angry, confrontational way. I am not that type of person. My career has taught me that the best revenge is not served hot or cold, it is served legally binding and financially devastating. I pulled out my own phone, making sure to keep it on silent and the brightness low because I am not a monster, and I started making some calls of my own. Well, actually, I started with text messages. You do not interrupt a movie for anyone, after all. My first message went to my friend Richard, who happened to be the regional operations manager for the entire premium cinema chain. We had gone to law school together, and I had helped him navigate a complicated intellectual property dispute a few years back. Hey Richard, are you available for a quick call after 9 p.m.? I have a situation and a proposition for you. It involves one of your theaters and a potential business opportunity. He responded within minutes saying he would call me as soon as I was free. My second message went to my private investigator, a woman named Sarah who specialized in background checks and asset searches. I had her on retainer for various client matters. Need a full workup on a Karen Whitmore. Sending photo now. Need to know property ownership, employment, any business interests, legal history, social media presence, everything. Rush job, need it by tomorrow afternoon. I discreetly took a photo of Karen, who was still yapping away, oblivious to the storm I was beginning to brew. By the time Karen's fourth call came in, around the 90-minute mark of the film, I had quietly exited the theater. I had seen enough, or rather, I had not seen nearly enough because of Karen's incessant phone conversations. I stood in the lobby and called Richard. Tell me you can do something about the nightmare in Theater 7, I said when he picked up. I explained the entire situation in detail, including the multiple calls, the usher's failed intervention, and Karen's defiant attitude. Richard sighed heavily. We get complaints about her specifically about once a month. Same theater, similar behavior. She thinks buying a ticket means she owns the place. We have asked her to leave before, but she always threatens legal action, and corporate does not want the hassle. She has never actually sued, but she is loud and persistent, and she leaves horrible online reviews every time we confront her. Management has basically decided it is easier to let her do what she wants and comp tickets for the people who complain. This was even better than I had hoped. A pattern of behavior, documented complaints, and a theater chain that was essentially being held hostage by one terrible customer. What if I told you I could solve your Karen problem permanently, and in the process, I could help you implement a policy that would protect you from similar situations in the future? I could practically hear Richard's ears perk up. I am listening, he said. I laid out my plan. It was beautiful in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. Richard loved it. He would need to run it past corporate legal, but he was confident he could get approval by Monday. We agreed to reconnect over the weekend. I hung up feeling satisfied, but I was not done yet. Not by a long shot. I went back into the theater just as the credits were rolling. Karen was still on her phone, now loudly complaining about the movie she had barely watched. It was so boring, and people were so rude, shushing me the whole time. Can you believe it? Like, I paid for my ticket just like everyone else. I waited in the lobby, watching as she exited. She walked right past the customer service desk where at least 4 people were filing complaints about her, completely oblivious or simply uncaring. The next morning, I received Sarah's report. It was a goldmine of information. Karen Whitmore was 53 years old, unemployed, divorced 3 years ago, and living off alimony payments that would end in another 2 years. She owned a modest home in a subdivision about 20 miles from the theater, where she served as the president of the Homeowners Association, a position she apparently wielded like a weapon based on the numerous complaints filed against the HOA during her tenure. She had no significant assets beyond her house and a leased luxury car she could barely afford. Her social media was a nightmare of entitled posts, complaints, and thinly veiled threats against various service workers and businesses. But the most interesting part was her hobby. Karen fancied herself a movie critic. She had a blog with about 200 followers where she posted lengthy, vitriolic reviews of films, theaters, and movie-going experiences. She bragged about her preferred seat at the Riverside Premium Cinema, the same seat she had occupied the night before, and openly admitted to taking phone calls during movies because, and I quote, "real life is more important than some made-up story on a screen. If people cannot handle a little conversation, they should stay home and watch Netflix." This was the piece of evidence I needed. I forwarded the relevant screenshots to Richard, along with Sarah's full report. By Monday afternoon, Richard called me back with good news. Corporate legal had approved the plan with a few modifications, and they were ready to move forward. They were actually excited about it because it gave them a framework to handle similar situations at other locations. Here is what we did. First, Premium Cinema implemented a new policy specifically for their Riverside location as a pilot program. They installed state-of-the-art cellular jamming technology in all theaters, completely legal for private property with proper FCC licensing, which they obtained. The system would activate once the previews ended and would block all cellular signals until the credits rolled. Emergency services could still get through via the theater's landline and staff radio system, and clear signage was posted at every entrance explaining the policy. Anyone who could not be without phone access for 2 hours could simply choose not to enter or sit in the lobby areas where signals were not blocked. Second, they revised their terms and conditions, which every ticket purchaser agrees to when buying a ticket. The new terms explicitly stated that repeat violations of theater policies, including phone usage, talking, or disruptive behavior, could result in a permanent ban from all Premium Cinema locations nationwide. They sent an email to all rewards program members, which included Karen, explaining the new policies. But here is where my legal expertise really came into play. I helped Richard's legal team craft these policies in a way that was ironclad. We studied every possible angle of attack, every potential lawsuit, and we built in protections for everything. The cellular jamming was legal, the terms were clear, and the ban policy was their right as a private business. We even included a clause that anyone banned could appeal the decision, but the appeals process required submitting a written statement that would become part of the company's records and could be used in any future legal proceedings. In other words, anything Karen wrote in an appeal could be used against her if she tried to sue. We did not have to wait long for Karen to walk into our trap. That Friday, exactly 1 week after the incident I had witnessed, Karen showed up for the 7 p.m. showing of a new release. She bought her ticket, grabbed her usual snacks, and settled into her preferred seat. The previews played without incident. Then the movie started, and the jamming system activated. According to Richard, who reviewed the security footage with me later, Karen did not notice anything wrong for about 10 minutes. Then her phone rang, or rather, tried to ring. She looked at her screen, confused by the sudden lack of signal. She held her phone up in the air, moving it around like some kind of bizarre antenna ritual. She checked her settings, restarted her phone, and generally made a scene trying to figure out what was wrong. By the 30-minute mark, she had gotten up and walked to the lobby, where her signal immediately returned. She had 3 missed calls. She marched up to the customer service desk and demanded to know what was wrong with their theater. The staff member politely explained the new cellular jamming policy and pointed to the very large, very clear signs posted at every entrance. Karen exploded. "This is illegal. You cannot block my phone. What if I have an emergency? This is discrimination. I am calling my lawyer." The staff member, who had been thoroughly trained for exactly this reaction, calmly explained that the system was completely legal, that emergency services were still accessible through theater staff, and that the policy had been communicated to all rewards members via email. Karen screamed that she had not read the email and should not be expected to read every single email they sent. The staff member pointed out that ignorance of posted policies did not exempt her from following them. Karen demanded a refund. The staff member processed it immediately, no questions asked. Karen then demanded they turn off the jamming system so she could watch her movie. The staff member politely declined, explaining it was now policy for all showings. Karen threatened to leave a horrible review. The staff member wished her a nice evening. Karen said she would be back next week and they could not stop her from buying a ticket. The staff member said that was her right as a customer, and they looked forward to serving her under the new policies. Here's where Karen made her fatal mistake. She went home and did exactly what we predicted she would do. She wrote a long, detailed blog post about her experience, calling for a boycott of premium cinema. She posted on every social media platform she had, tagging the company and using hashtags to try to get attention. And in her rage, she wrote something incredibly stupid. She explicitly stated that she would continue to go to premium cinema and would bring a signal booster to bypass their jamming system, and she encouraged others to do the same. Bringing a signal booster to bypass lawful cellular jamming is a federal crime. She had just confessed to conspiracy to commit a federal offense in writing, publicly, with her real name attached. Richard forwarded all of Karen's posts to Premium Cinema's legal department, who forwarded them to the FCC and the FBI's Cyber Crimes Division. But we still were not done. Karen did exactly what she said she would do. The following Friday, she showed up with a small signal booster in her purse, the kind that is marketed to people who live in rural areas with poor cell service. The device was not powerful enough to actually work against Premium Cinema's military-grade jamming system, but she did not know that. She tried to use it, and theater security, who had been alerted to watch for exactly this behavior, caught her on camera attempting to activate it. They escorted her out of the theater and informed her that she was permanently banned from all Premium Cinema locations for attempting to bypass security systems. Karen screamed that she would sue. The security supervisor handed her a written notice of ban and a packet of information explaining her appeal rights. Karen tore it up and threw it at the supervisor. That was assault on camera, against a witness, on private property after being told to leave. The supervisor called the police. The police arrived and reviewed the footage. They saw Karen refusing to leave, attempting to use an unauthorized signal booster, and committing assault. They arrested her for trespassing and assault. The signal booster was confiscated as evidence. At the station, Karen made everything worse by continuing to rant about her rights and threatening to sue everyone involved, including the arresting officers. The local news picked up the story because it was a slow news week and the body cam footage was pure gold. Karen Whitmore, local HOA president, arrested at movie theater for trespassing and assault, caught on camera trying to use illegal equipment to make phone calls during movies. The story went viral locally, and then it went viral nationally because someone cut together a compilation of Karen's blog posts and social media rants with the body cam footage. Within 48 hours, Karen was an internet meme. Within 72 hours, her HOA called an emergency meeting and voted her out as president. Within a week, the FCC had fined her $5,000 for the signal booster, and the FBI had her on a watch list. Her alimony payments got tied up in legal fees defending herself against the assault charge, which she eventually pleaded down to disorderly conduct with a fine and community service. But the real devastation came from Premium Cinema's legal response. Remember that appeal process I mentioned? Karen, in her infinite wisdom, decided to file an appeal of her ban. She submitted a 10-page rant about how she was the real victim, how movie theaters were engaging in discrimination, and how she had every right to use her phone whenever she wanted because she was a paying customer. She signed it, dated it, and submitted it to Premium Cinema's legal department. They used every word of it in their countersuit. Because yes, Karen did sue them, claiming emotional distress, loss of enjoyment, and about a dozen other nonsense claims. Premium Cinema's lawyers, with my help pro bono because this had become personal, filed a motion to dismiss based on their terms of service, which Karen had agreed to when she purchased her ticket. We attached her appeal letter, her blog posts, her social media rants, and the police reports. We demonstrated a clear pattern of deliberate, malicious disregard for theater policies and the moviegoing experience of others. The judge dismissed Karen's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning she could never file another claim on the same grounds. The judge also ordered Karen to pay Premium Cinema's legal fees, which totaled just over $40,000, an amount we had deliberately run up by overdocumenting everything and using senior partners for every single filing. Karen did not have $40,000. The judgment went against her credit, her house went into foreclosure, and she had to move into a small apartment on the other side of town. Now here is the beautiful final touch. Remember how I mentioned I was an entertainment lawyer who had just closed a major deal? That independent film franchise I mentioned? Part of the distribution deal I had negotiated included creative marketing partnerships with theater chains. 3 months after Karen's ban, Premium Cinema and the production company I represented launched a joint campaign about respecting the theatrical experience. The campaign featured real stories of disruptive moviegoers, though names were changed, and emphasized the importance of common courtesy. The centerpiece of the campaign was a short film, about 5 minutes long, that played before every movie at Premium Cinema locations nationwide. It was a comedic but pointed piece about the decline of movie theater etiquette. And while we did not use Karen's real name or actual footage, anyone who had followed the story would recognize the not-so-subtle references. The campaign was a massive success and was eventually adopted by other theater chains. My client's franchise became synonymous with respecting cinema as an art form. As for Karen, the last I heard, she was working part-time at a call center and living in a studio apartment. She had declared bankruptcy, her car had been repossessed, and she was essentially persona non grata in her former social circles. The blog she had been so proud of was defunct, abandoned after the relentless mockery she received online. Her social media accounts were deleted after the harassment became too much, though much of it was just people reminding her that actions have consequences. But my absolute favorite part of this entire saga? I happened to be at a different movie theater about 6 months after everything went down. I was there to see an early screening of another client's film. I was standing in the lobby when I saw her. Karen was there with what looked like a date, some unfortunate man who clearly did not know her history. They were in line to buy tickets. I watched as they approached the concession stand, and Karen's date asked if she wanted anything. She shook her head and said, "No, I am good. I just want to watch the movie." Her phone rang in her purse. She pulled it out, looked at the screen, and then silenced it and put it back in her purse without answering. Her date did not notice, but I did. In that moment, watching Karen Whitmore silence her phone in a movie theater lobby, I knew I had accomplished something truly special. I had not just gotten revenge. I had not just cost her money or humiliated her publicly. I had fundamentally changed her behavior. I had taught an unteachable person a lesson so devastating, so complete, that it had rewired her instincts. She had become the person she should have been all along, not through any sudden moral awakening, but through the sheer weight of consequences she could no longer avoid. As I sat in my seat waiting for the screening to begin, I pulled out my phone one last time. I texted Richard. "Just saw our friend at the Cinemark on Westwood." She silenced her phone. He texted back 3 words. "Mission accomplished. Thanks." I silenced my own phone, dimmed the screen, and tucked it away in my pocket. The lights went down, the previews began, and I sat in perfect, uninterrupted silence, surrounded by people who all understood the simple social contract of the movie theater. And somewhere in that same building, 3 theaters over, Karen Whitmore sat in silence too, her phone buried in her purse, her mouth shut, watching a movie the way everyone else in the world had always watched movies. She had finally learned that the rules applied to her too, and all it had taken was federal fines, criminal charges, a lawsuit, public humiliation, financial ruin, and the complete destruction of her social standing. Some lessons, I suppose, are harder to learn than others. The last thing I ever heard about Karen came from Sarah, my private investigator, about a year later. She had taken a job in another state, moved away from the area entirely, and was apparently living a quiet, unremarkable life. No HOA presidency, no blog, no social media presence at all. Just a person working a regular job and paying off debt. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about that night in the Riverside Premium Cinema, the night that one phone call too many set off a chain of events that completely upended her life. I wonder if she understands that it did not have to be that way, that a simple act of consideration could have prevented everything that followed. But mostly, I do not think about Karen at all. I am too busy enjoying movies in peace, in theaters where people remember that silence is golden and that the world can wait for 2 hours. Because that is the thing about entitled people who think the rules do not apply to them. Eventually, inevitably, they learn that the rules always apply. Sometimes they learn it the easy way, with a polite request and a moment of self-reflection. And sometimes, when they refuse to learn the easy way, life teaches them the hard way. Karen learned it the hardest way possible. And every time I sit in a theater and notice the person next to me silence their phone without being asked, I smile just a little bit. Because somewhere out there, Karen Whitmore is doing the same thing, not because she wants to, but because she finally understands what happens when you push someone who has the resources, the patience, and the legal expertise to push back. The movie that night was excellent, by the way. I did not miss a single word. If you enjoyed hearing about Karen getting exactly what she deserved, please hit that like button and subscribe to Karen Eat World. We have got tons more stories about entitled people facing the consequences of their actions. Drop a comment telling me about the most annoying person you have ever encountered at a movie theater. Trust me, I want to hear all about it. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next one.